Good job, Sam.
Remembered. Okay, so thank you all for attending and for signing up for this virtual Hangouts. It's actually the 9th one we've had in this series. So if you are new to Remake, or just as a quick reminder, I want you to know that Remake is a nonprofit purely focused on making fashion a force for good. We're a community of students, young professionals, influencers, designers, and thrifters who've all pledged to wear our values and put an end to fast fashion. And what we do is we create documentary films and fact-filled stories, campaign assets, and workshop materials to really help educate people about the impact of fashion, the impact fast fashion has on people and planet. We also drive transparency and accountability across the fashion industry. And so right now that's purely focused on our Pay Up campaign, so holding brands accountable to pay for the orders that they've placed and not put the financial burden, the risk burden on garment makers who really are the most vulnerable across our supply chains. And then what we focus on is we build local leaders. So we train millennial and Gen Z leaders to be to educate and inspire and uplift their community, and to help everyone in their community help them wear their values and really advocate for women's rights and climate justice. So some people on this call are Remake ambassadors and a part of that community. For those that you want to learn more about being a Remake ambassador and being part of this leader community, you can email me. I'm Sam Hartsock, the Director of Education at Remake, and my email is sam@remake.world. So one second, I'm going to admit some more people. Okay, cool. So just some background on this conversation. So Melissa and I wanted to host this conversation because we're often asked, how do you work in sustainability, or more specifically, how do I work in sustainable fashion? While there is now way more opportunities in this space compared to when me and Melissa started job hunting back in 2008 and 2010, it's still really difficult to navigate and perhaps significantly more competitive these days for a limited number of jobs. And I know now many of y'all are also graduating, and job seeking in itself is hard enough, but now we're all doing that in this global crisis. So we just really wanted to bring together a community to have this conversation, to put concerns out there, to give you a little bit about our backgrounds and the way we've navigated our career path, and to share a little bit about what we've learned along the way. So once me and Melissa both do that, we'll also open up to Q&A and just try to answer as many people's questions. And then as a last quick logistic point, Caroline is on the call. She's the program manager for our education program at Remake, and she'll be taking notes as well. So we can, again, send any follow-up, or if we missed any questions, we'll follow up with you. And thank you to everyone who sent us, answered our little questions before this call. That was a really helpful context setting on our part. So I will, last thing to say before I hand it over to Melissa is just that we're hoping that this is the first conversation. There was a good bit of interest that Remake hosts around starting to have a career in sustainable fashion. So if you have any feedback, or if there were specific things you wanted to dive in more deeply on, please let us know. You can email me and we will try to answer those and tee up a couple more conversations. I'm working on getting the head of SOCO to come and talk to us as well. So hopefully that will be one of the conversations we have in the future. So with that, I will hand things over to Melissa.
Hi, everyone. So I'm in a bit of a different space today, to be very, very frank with all of you. I work at REI. I'm a sourcing analyst. And I wasn't going to start with this, but I feel like I need to, because it's really helping me level set, where you just tell you guys where I'm at. But I'll tell you just where I'm at mentally, and then I'll let you know a bit more about my role and everything at REI and how I got there. So as you all know, the retail space is very uncertain right now, and there's just a lot going on in this space of brands trying to figure out what they're going to do with revenue generation, and not having in-store retail. Brick and mortar stores available for revenue is a really hard thing for a lot of companies. So today is the day that REI is like letting everyone at headquarters know if they will be laid off or not. There's like a 25% amount of their headquarters employees that they need to let go. And we let know all of our retail employees that we're requiring furlough for them for 3 months, except for managers. So there's a lot, and this is information that's, open sourced. It's, if you're a member with REI, they've been very frank and transparent about this. And I can go into more about how they've like managed this whole situation if anyone has questions. But basically there's 2 revenue generations for REI: Adventures and retail. And retail has online and has in-store. And Adventures and in-store have a really hard time right now. So there's, they project to lose millions in this situation, and they have to look at their balance sheet and really figure out how to make the cash flow work to make sure the co-op stays around. So I'm having a lot of really hard conversations with friends and coworkers, and really just feeling the woes of the community changing. Okay, so my role currently at REI, and I don't have any news on my role if you want to know. I was supposed to find out this morning, so maybe no news is good news, but I don't know yet. But currently I'm a sourcing analyst for REI's private label. And what that means is anything that REI makes as their own product. So that they either collab with a vendor or they make from start to finish. And basically my team does all of our domestic sourcing. So anything that's produced in the Americas. And I particularly focus on running our shared services program. So that means like we want to use our vendors for products that our internal teams need, and make sure that they've been run through our checkpoints of sustainability and through they've been vetted. And it's not just like a team going rogue and ordering like a bunch of hats for an event that they need. So they would come to me for that instead. So I utilize our vendor base to make sure that we're using our best product on all fronts. If we need it for an event, or if we need it for a store opening, or we need it for anything like that. So I run kind of our shared services program. And then I'm also in charge of dashboarding our sustainability attributes for those products. So that's where my sustainability part of my role comes in. I really love operations and supply chain, and sustainability is my my kind of secret weapon, I guess. So I gave you all a bit of information about like what's happening with REI, and that, things are really changing right now. So we'll get into a little bit more about how we think it's best to navigate the times. But to give you some information about like how I got to where I am now, I grew up doing historical reenactments. That's how I got interested in apparel. I started sewing when I was like 6, just making little doll clothes at Sutter's Fort in Sacramento. And I thought I always wanted to be a buyer or choose product for people. And when I went to college, I learned about how dirty the industry is. And I realized I didn't know that like how clothes are really made. I had no idea. And after learning, I was like, I can't be part of that. I don't know what I want to do, but I can't be part of that. So I tried to find anything I could in sustainable fashion. I found a nonprofit that was very similar to Remake. They would showcase designers. I lived in San Francisco, and they would showcase designers at events, like small organic underwear companies or like small local designers. And I meant to start my network by working for a nonprofit, and then I didn't mean to. It was an opportunity that I found, and it kind of evolved from there. I started working at one of the companies that they showcased eventually. I was in design. I kind of moved into merchandising. And at Bloomingdale's, I started working at Levi's because I wanted to figure out how clothes were actually made. And I worked at their lab making denim for them for a while. And then I realized I didn't know what role I really wanted to have that was going to make change. And that's why I went to grad school. So Sam and I met getting our MBAs together at Presidio Graduate School in sustainable management. And I did that because I have an apparel and environmental studies background, but I don't have a business degree. specifically, and I really wanted to ensure that I was getting a business focus in my degree, and then also something that was like just icing on the cake was a sustainability focused MBA. After, like in grad school, I tried to see if I wanted to go into marketing or supply chain, because I was like, I don't want to do all the things I've been doing, but those are the two that I haven't tried. And those are the two I think I would be good at. I kind of looked at my strengths of being a conversationalist, being outgoing, being interested in systems, and tried both in my projects at school. And I landed on supply chain, and for a lot of reasons, but mostly due to my strengths and just my feeling of actually being able to make change in the industry by working with vendors and really hearing their voice, and then relaying that into the company I was working for. So not always a really like environmental studies focused. I'm not always working on like really like environmental studies focused sustainability. I'm often working on social sustainability as well. So yeah, and then some best advice that I've gotten throughout my career. It's more than okay for your path to not be a typical one, not be a straight one, I guess. Mine was not in any way a ladder. Like if you look at my LinkedIn, it's like, oh, she tried on a lot of things. And I did that because I didn't know. You have to try things on to figure it out. And then a partner and a dear friend of mine always reminded me, even with the lens of sustainability, follow the money, because that's really how you know what a company cares about and how healthy they are. And then the last piece of advice is just like an amalgamation of a lot of advice that I've been given that I just kind of formed for myself. But I tend to be a people pleaser. And so something that I really need to remind myself of often is self-care means giving yourself permission to pause, take inventory, and make an intentional step. So I just think self-care is something that I always need to remind myself to do in an industry like this, especially. And I saw there was a question about what you mean by follow the money. What I mean by that is, if you can really figure out what a company's objectives are, and you can see where they are putting their energy, and how they're really, a lot of this information is something you won't know until you're working inside of a company. But I think that trying to ask questions around how decisions are made and where people's energy is like asked to focus within the organization really shows like how much a company cares about their people, or how much they care about making good product, or where sustainability is on their balance sheet, basically, if that makes sense. Okay, I'll stop there and let Sam introduce herself, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Okay, so a little bit about my background. As I mentioned, I'm the Director of Education at Remake, but alongside that, I am also the co-founder of QB Consulting, and QB is a purpose-driven strategy and communications firm, and what we do is we work with companies to develop, design, and deploy environmental, social, and governance strategies. So really seeing the whole scope of a company, working with the board, senior leadership, down to kind of like ICs on what it takes to launch a sustainability strategy, and then also execute it, message it to your employees and to your investors, and then do your full reporting look back. It's kind of this like holistic perspective. And what's interesting kind of about my journey is my whole education piece is based in textile apparel and sustainable fashion. But what I realized over the course of different jobs and roles that I had, sustainable fashion, or fashion in general, is more of a passion of mine and not what I wanted to be working in from my day-to-day. So a lot of the companies that I do work with are in financial services, are in tech, and are mostly like cloud-based companies. So very different, but feel very blessed that I can do both the things that I truly enjoy. Let's If I were to think about maybe starting at the beginning, so I got my bachelor's degree in textile and apparel management. I wanted to work in supply chain. I wanted to do human rights work in supply chain, but I also graduated in 2008 into the crisis, the financial crisis, this is now looking dwarfed compared to what we're all experiencing today. So I had to take a big shift, and what that ended up looking like is I went and found a startup and small company and started working for them for super low rates, but it was very exciting. I got to work with Tom's. So at that time, a lot of new companies were starting to do new things. So I was a retail marketing intern, which was very far from what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in supply chains. I wanted to help build product. I wanted to source product. I wanted to understand why people bought certain fabrics, where it came from. But I think a lot of this journey, especially working in sustainable fashion, is about being open to where the opportunities take you, and knowing that, fashion is complex. It's really helpful to see all facets of that business. And it's also an industry that's constantly evolving. So I worked at Tom's in their retail marketing department, had to build trade show walls, and did a lot of kind of construction, like crafty work that I never thought. And eventually they fired me from those projects because they realized I couldn't make anything straight to save my life, and was put more onto Excel and community building and kind of like sales type of roles. And so I did that for a while, but the market was, still not ready. They were kind of done hiring their 20-something-year-olds. I was still looking for a job living in LA. Companies like Macy's and Nordstrom's traditional career paths still were not hiring at that time. It was like 2010. And so I followed the opportunity to Austin, Texas, where I got a project contract with they were Handmade Expressions. Melissa, they are now, because they were one of Globin's biggest Manish.
Matarbumi.
Martabumi, yeah. So now
Yeah.
Martabumi, but they're a fair trade shop based in Austin. A husband and wife run it, and they work with his sister in India and have a collective of artisans throughout India. And they do a lot of sourcing and designing products, and sell those products to companies like Globin. So they do more of this wholesale focus. So that was great. It was getting me it was trying to get me closer to the supply chain, which is what I still wanted. But I was also hired to do social media because it's 2010 and I was like in my early 20s. So they just thought that you could do it. So I think, again, part of it is just like constantly being open to evolving your skill set for what the industry needs. And that's what I was a lot of trying to be open to. After that, I was like, I need to make more than $12 an hour. And so I took a job with the Dallas Museum of Art. And to me, that still was somewhat aligned in this area that I wanted to work, which was like product for good, at least product, supporting this arts institution. So I was a buyer for their museum store, and I set them up online. So again, more focused on this like retail merchandising space, but doing things that I had never done before, which was taking stylized photo shots throughout the museum and throwing them online, and learning how to run an e-commerce store, learning how to build SEO or whatever that looked like in 2010. So it's just like always being open to new skill sets and new ways you can apply like what you're interested in. And I think at best you can, being open to taking those opportunities. So I was really frustrated with my career so far in sustainable fashion. And felt like the opportunities were still very limiting. And so I asked myself, like, what do I most value about my career and the companies that I want to work for? And how can that open up more of the places that I could work or have an actual career that provided me insurance, paid me like a living wage? Like, I need to make some money here. So once I did that, that actually took me and dropped trying to work in fashion altogether, and focused more on working for a social enterprise or just some kind of for-profit organization focused on doing good, doing better for the world. Took me to DC, and I worked for change.org, and I ended up working there for 5 years. I was on the business development team at Change. I was hired as the second business development associate there. And so we grew from a team of like 50 people when I started to 300 to like 1 million users to 10 million users. So just like tech companies scaling, it was amazing, but it also opened up my world to a whole new side. am originally from Garland, Texas, and my point of view of nonprofits and politics is that they are ineffective and nothing ever changes. And moving to DC really opened up my world to a whole nother community of like what effective grassroots organizing and online organizing really can look like, and how impactive collective power is, and how impactful the role of nonprofits are, and business, that business doesn't hold all the solutions. And especially as we're working to make this like systemic change across the fashion industry, you need all the players in place. So that was such a great crash course learning to me in just advocacy and the great work that nonprofits are doing, and that business isn't always the solution, and that creating more product isn't always the solution for creating a better world, and that those two shouldn't necessarily be so tightly tied together. Did that for 5 years, loved it, finally had enough money, so got to pay for myself to go to business school, which was great. And that's where I kind of like reassessed where I wanted to work in this space, and realized that I loved sustainability consulting, and that is what I want to do. And I love helping products scale or solve problems. So while I was getting my MBA, I interned for a larger, like been around the block, really amazing consulting firm, but thought I could do things a little differently. So that's why I started QB while I was getting my degree. And that's what I've been doing for the past 3 years. And at the same time, helping out Remake, because I realized my passion for sustainable fashion really falls in this like advocacy space, really advocating for women's rights, human rights, and climate justice. And then as far as like my top 3 tips that I got is, one was from my intern manager at Tom's, and she said like, don't worry about being too aggressive. It's better to be more aggressive and be top of mind. So we were always like, oh, am I emailing this person too much? And she was a recruiter herself, and she was like, I'd rather have you top of mind. I'm going to think of you for an opportunity than someone who's worrying about like being a nuisance in my inbox. And then this one came from my grandpa. He said, there's no dream job out there. No matter if you have your dream job, it is going to annoy you at one point or the other. So you want to find a job that you love, find a job that you enjoy, but there's no perfect job out there. And I feel like I've been lucky enough to have 3 dream jobs, and they've all annoyed the hell out of me. So I think it's just like that perspective's been really helpful. And then one of my teammates at change.org told me this, which helped reorient how I look at evaluating companies that I work with. She was about 8 years older than me at the time, I think in her like mid 30s. And she was like, I don't look for the company or the role as much as I look at the people that I'll be spending my day to day with. And that really hit me of, like I spend more time with these people than my family. Are these people I want to work with on a regular basis? And I was still super early in my career and trying to just climb the ladder. So that was kind of like a wake up call for me as something else to consider. Okay, so thanks for going on those career journeys with us. We just wanted to show y'all a little bit of our backgrounds and how we got to where we are. We have 2 questions that we're going to start answering from ones that y'all had submitted, but if you wanted to just start dropping them in the chat as we're answering these questions, we can kind of go from there, if that works for everyone. Thumbs up. Cool. Okay. So this first one came from Camilla, and she asked, how should we approach job searching in a time of crisis and pandemic with furloughs and layoffs happening throughout the industry? And Melissa, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this question because Sam and I actually started talking about doing this webinar before we really added the part about like in uncertain times. And it's all very different in this current situation. And I think that everyone needs to like really put themselves in a space to understand that. For the hiring managers, it's very different. For the businesses, for the nonprofits, for the individuals that you might want to work with. Every single person has a very different landscape that they're working within. So my number one first thing is know your worth and figure out how to get a poker face. And that's because you don't really know how people are going to react right now. You don't really know where people are. And I think putting yourself in their shoes is really important first. And knowing your worth is more important first. And figuring out where they are so you can meet them where they are is really important as well. Second, like, take inventory. This is an opportunity for you to view this as a time to find something that you actually want to do. It might take a little longer or a lot longer, but you don't have to jump into the dream job right now either. What's a step that can get you to another step after this? So make finding your new job your new job. I'm sure that's a given for many people, but creating a space that's just for you and your job search can really change how you have an outlook on it. And self-care is really important through this whole process. And then 4, like, snoop. Like I said, follow the money. Like, find out what's going on in that industry and what they've already done for this in this time. This has been happening for me. It's been happening since early January because I have a lot of China. My other teammates are working with our China suppliers, and we've been reissuing POs and revalidating all of our POs for them. POs are purchase orders, because they were closed and we needed to reevaluate and reorganize. So it's been a landscape for people in product maybe since end of December. So they will have already done something, and figure out what those are. Figure out what makes you unique, number 5. And we'll send out notes about all of this afterwards, everyone. So don't worry about like taking frivolous notes right now. Maybe, I don't know, give yourself some space to just listen if you can't listen and take notes at the same time. 6 is make a bomb online profile, because that is your moneymaker. That is your face right now. You cannot go in person. So that is where you are available, and make sure that it's how you want to be represented for what you really want in the industry. I can go into more details there. I have a lot of like hot tips that I've like talked to my recent career coach friend about, and I'll put those in notes so that we're not just like bogging down this conversation with all the little things. They're not little things. They're going to move your needle for sure, but they're like more tactile. And then second to last, number 7 is just network. I think it's way more important to be really strategic right now than it is to run around putting your resume out everywhere. Making sure that you, like, those individuals that are already in an industry that you're interested in, those individuals who are already working at a company you're interested in that has jobs that are posted, those are the people that you want to connect with to try to understand before making a step. I think you're figuring out what your brand is so that you're hireable is really important. And that comes with networking. And then lastly is be patient, because it's going to take a lot longer than usual.
Yep. And I'll just
yeah, go ahead.
I'll just add on to that. And I think it's kind of like fitting for the question that Camille asked, which is like, is it tactful to network right now when people are dying? And I think it's a balance, right? We're all balancing the different things we have going on in our lives. And I think part of it is for you to reach out with empathy, but also like reaching out and understanding. I like how Melissa said, like finding out what makes you unique, but then how can you be useful? So when you are reaching out, are you reaching out offering to help this person, to help this organization? Like, how can you be a value add to them while you're also, for you as a benefit, trying to like grow that relationship, grow that skill, grow that network? So I think that's the big thing to keep in mind. And then a lot of the like, be gracious, be empathetic, know people have a lot going on, but people also understand like everyone across. I think the unemployed numbers increased another 6 million as of today. So it's just like a lot of people are looking for jobs. So I think employers understand that as well. And just for one perspective, I think it goes to answering, where is it? Amelia's question, which is like, how underqualified for a position can I be to apply for it and still be considered? I think my usual advice would be to just apply. I think right now it's better off to, as Melissa said, be more strategic about how you apply to jobs. And I think right now, more than anything, not applying to, black boxes or empty boxes where you don't know where your resume is going. Really be thoughtful about where you're sending your resume or who you're building relationships with. Like, focus more on high value versus high quantity. And just as an example of, even before all this is happening, one of my clients was looking for a head of their sustainability firm, of their program at the company, and they received 700 applicants in a month. So just know, like, these jobs that people are searching for are just very competitive. So the more you can build relationships and show value that you have, the better. I also am thinking about, particularly in this time, employers want to see how you were impactful during this crisis. Like, what did you spend your time on during this crisis? How did you have a voice, especially in fashion? Like, fashion's changing so much right now. So how are you a part of this change or supporting what was happening throughout the industry? Like, how are you being a resource during this time to others, to your community, to organizations, to nonprofits, to businesses, to garment makers, is something I would think about too, knowing that, it isn't as effective as it was 2 months ago when you were possibly applying for jobs or looking at new opportunities.
I do want to say one more thing on that, Sam, and then I want to make sure we jump to another question. But the other thing is, like, how can you build your skills right now while maybe doing something else to generate revenue for yourself, cash flow for yourself? Like, maybe it is working at Amazon's. I mean, I don't want to just tell you guys what to do of where to look for jobs right now, but like, maybe it is taking a job that is paying your rent while you build up skills, like taking a project management course online, or taking or finding ways to, like, find a nonprofit that you can write an article for and show that you're building that skill set, or do having a chat with friends and building a group just to have, like, in solidarity of how to, like, navigate these times, shows that you can collaborate, be a leader, and all of those things. Like, you can find ways to include them into your skill set that you're building in your resume, and on your LinkedIn. I could talk about this forever. I'm going to pause myself and go to the next thing.
Let's see. Yeah. So we had a question from, like, Mallory. So I'm looking to pursue an MBA in sustainability management. Along with that, do you have specific organizations or companies you would recommend to get started volunteering or interning with for experience? And she's based in LA. So one I can recommend is Seed Consulting. They're a really cool nonprofit, and they do a lot of pro bono consulting, volunteering for different nonprofits. And they have chapters in LA and chapters in the Bay Area. I think they're also national as well, but the one I've worked with the most is in California. And they do, like, a lot of work with NRDC and other different nonprofits. So off the top of my mind, that's a great organization.
I'm trying to think, like, besides Remake, other nonprofits that are in the space or doing there's also, like, a lot of newsletters out there, right? Like, Go Blue is actually former REI employees, but I think Sam actually told me about Go Blue. There's newsletters that you can get up-to-date information on what's happening in the industry, and there are, like, they post jobs in there, and they also post opportunities for, like, just what's happening in the industry right now, and how maybe it will spark something else in your brain, or there's some organization that you didn't know about that they've listed on there. So newsletters and, like groups, I'm trying to think if they're maybe on Facebook, or, like, meetups that you can do virtually.
Yeah.
Any way that you can find, like, people who are in the space will be valuable.
Mm-hmm. And what I did too is I spent a lot of time when I was looking for jobs during business school, or just projects to take on during business school. One, did a lot of research, started building a list of the companies, who worked at the companies, what they did, understood the products they offered, and then my theorized gaps that they had. And so I would reach out to small excuse me, small nonprofits and offer what I saw as a value to them. And that's how I started working for SOCO and did like a project management experience for them. So I think a lot of it is, especially when companies are small, they're looking for help and they're looking for people who are able to identify needs and provide solutions. So I think that's also another way to build relationships with future organizations you'd want to look with. It's just being proactive to understand that, and that shows that you listen and can synthesize, which is massive when working in sustainability or particularly in sustainable fashion as well.
Now that I think about it, Sam, all three of my like most pivotal points in my career were from working for free for someone. Sorry, but working for free for someone, and it taking me somewhere. I was an intern for the nonprofit that I started at in college for maybe 2 years, and I wasn't paid. And then I met other small businesses through them. It's not the best, but it does show that you have something on your resume that you're doing that's in the space that maybe isn't giving you any kind of paycheck, but it will open doors, like a lot of them. If you show your persistence and also just your like ingenuity and agility in adapting to what the company needs or what the organization needs.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Other questions we've got here. What do you think companies are looking for in sustainability professionals right now?
Yeah, so I actually, to be very transparent, I actually applied for a senior sustainability analyst role at REI and didn't get past the first interview while I was working there. Like it opened up while I was working there a couple months ago. And I looked at the job role. I wrote down all the things that were skill sets that I wanted, skill sets that I had that the job role needed, and tried to really bucket like the things that I felt like the three things I think I bucketed out were materiality assessment work and working with the Higg Index and like overall just implementation for the merch team and for the private label. Those were like the three bigger things that they wanted. And I don't have very much experience in greenhouse gas like calculations and like really the nitty gritty behind the science of lowering emissions for brands. Anyways, I am much more of a project management, supply chain operations person. And I like said all of that in my interview. I was like, I actually am much more focused on this and I'm much better at these skills. And it opened up an opportunity for us to talk about how we could help me like be a supportive role and maybe not be in that role. And so I don't know that I'm really answering this question. I guess what I'm saying is there's every sustainability role within every organization is going to have different needs. Like the brand is going to have made that role based on what their needs are, based on what their objectives are, based on what, like it all trickles down to a tactile role. And and you need to really understand what it is that they need and what it is that you offer that matches that. And if they're misaligned, I think it's really important to have that conversation and figure out like what it is that you need to build to get there, or how you understand that that's not what you want and you want something else.
And then as a follow-up to that, I was like, any particular things we should be working on, certifications to look into, programs to learn?
I guess I'm having a hard time with that one only because I'm not in a very straightforward sustainability role. So if someone wants to be in a straightforward sustainability role, a lot of the people who are on the sustainability team at Levi's or REI came from a background not necessarily in apparel. They came from a background of environmental studies with an MBA or an MS in environmental management.
Or a law degree.
Or a law degree, yeah. And I came from the apparel side because I wanted to understand product and I love making things. So I had that background, and it does not necessarily get me into a sustainability role, even having an MBA in sustainable management, because my skill sets that I built have not led up to that. And that's okay. That is not what I want. But if you do want that, I think there's just, look at the people who are already in the roles and look at what their path was. It doesn't mean that yours has to be exactly like that, but I think understanding what skills they built are really important, because that's what they're ultimately looking at on your resume, is skills you have, not necessarily the titles nor exact degrees.
And I will say, us as women typically think that we need to add on our badges to make us qualified for roles. So just as a level check to yourself, like how many degrees or certifications do you already have? And you're probably way more qualified than you think too. That's just like patterns I see across my friends and colleagues as well too.
Yeah, coming from sales, like if you were in a sales role and you're now trying to get into like a marketing role or something, there are a lot of skill sets that are very directly proportional or relatable from sales to marketing, or even sales to supply chain, because I'm just using that as an example. But break down what it is you really did in that day-to-day. Like, think about what kind of relationship you had with your coworkers. Were you collaborating often? Were you like are you better at working on a small team? Are you better at working on a larger team? What do you really want? And how have you already had experience in that? And how has it taken you to where you are now? Yeah. Is there any part of that? Is there anything else that I need to, was there another question? I feel like I got lost.
Okay.
In my answer, to be honest.
Another question we had that came up earlier, which was around like, what are successful strategies that other people have used to transition into a job that's sustainable fashion? So like, I think we kind of touched on this a little bit, like, is this getting the right degree, networking, transitioning from a different role in the same company?
God, it's different for everyone. I know a lot of people who've just worked at companies and then made it into sustainability because they've showed their worth in different ways that team needed. It wasn't that they had a background in sustainability management in any way. So figuring out your value and then making it work with what's needed, I guess. I've seen it in all different ways. I've seen it where, like, when I was at Levi's, the director of sustainability was someone who worked at Levi's for 25 years and had no degree period. He didn't even have an MBA, a bachelor's degree. I've seen it where every other person on the team had an MBA or an MS, but they came later in their career straight into the team. I've seen it with Globin, the other organization I worked for. None of them had a background in sustainability, but they had a background in those specific roles, and then the organization was an overall sustainability focused organization. So I guess I've seen it all ways. How would you answer that, Sam?
Let's see. I mean, I'm a big proponent of use what you've got. Sustainability and sustainable fashion has so many elements that need to be fixed. I mean, I think what we're learning more than anything is like fashion is broken heavily, and that it's going to be dramatically changed coming out of COVID. So how can you use the skill sets you have learned and apply them to a problem that you see, right? To me, I think going back to the question of like, what are some of those skills or commonalities that people who work in sustainability have? I think it's people who can see the big picture. Like, are you a systems thinker? Can you connect problems? Can you look across an industry and see trends? I think is huge. Are you able to listen? Can you listen to the people on your team? Can you listen to your stakeholders? Can you listen to your customers, to your suppliers? And then what are you hearing as commonalities from there? And then are you able to kind of like synthesize large pieces of information and then communicate them well? So much of sustainability is like communicating and activating, whether that's your bosses or your board or senior leadership to be bought in on spending money on a sustainability initiative, or working with your vendors to like change a product or a fabric type, or like from different sourcing places, building a product a different way, building less product, and advocating that as a good option. I think its ability to understand how to like influence people too is super huge. And
yeah, the influence people part is just like a huge giant like green flag in my brain. I want to say like 75% of my job is just listening to people and figuring out how we can like collaborate and make change together. Figuring out what's happening in their world and what's happening in our world, and like why we want to do the same thing, and finding that common thread. With vendors, with merchants, like I sit in the middle of them. So that's a lot of my job is just listening and making sure I understand what it is that is happening, and then articulating it, and code switching, which can be really exhausting, as someone who's in the middle of something, like figuring out what someone needs, translating it to get to the other path of whoever needs to hear it. And right now, everyone's just got to listen a lot more.
Has anyone here, this is kind of just like our experience and what we've done over the course of our career. Has anyone found anything that worked, or resources you'd love to share with the group, or just experiences you've had? We don't have any other questions rolling in, if y'all wanted to share that instead.
Do we want to let them like speak to, like actually just that you, feel free to just go unmute and go for it.
I'll share one that was shared with me. I don't remember where, but LinkedIn groups are really cool. Not only because people there are kind of peers and share interests, but also, and this is the key part, you can message people that are in your same group. And I don't pay for LinkedIn Premium, so it's really good to be able to just send a message to someone and reach out in a way that makes sense and isn't necessarily invasive.
Yep. And put a, if you're reaching out to someone, put a message, add a note to that connection. That's like.
This is not actually, yes, thank you for clarifying. Yes, not to request the connection. This is literally as a way to message them directly. So if you don't have InMail, which is like LinkedIn's internal messaging credits, they allow you to send a message, just a message, not a connection request, to someone. So for example, I find someone wrote an article that I agree with or that resonated with me, I'll reach out via the LinkedIn message to them.
I did not know that. That's cool. Yeah, I also find too, when I get people asking for connections, the ones without notes just sit in my connect box, but the ones that at least send a message are usually who I connect with and chat with too. Those are like thinking about who to build relationships with. It's all kind of like doing it very doing with authenticity. Any other tips or things you want to share? I know someone, when they wrote us back about having this conversation, they also said that they were looking forward to also just commiserating with people during this job search, because part of it is knowing like we're all doing this together and we're all doing it in a very like unknown time. And as Melissa mentioned, probably over the past 2 months, a lot of fashion brands possibly having layoffs as the reality of like our economic crisis sits in even more.
It's sad and it's really scary. I think it's also really beautiful in a way. I don't necessarily like to just like I'm not trying to sugarcoat it in any way. I just think that I wonder in this time if it will really mean that brands need to differentiate themselves from here and really show that they care about like I mean, we have a global consciousness that's happening right now. Every single human, or I mean, a majority of the humans on this planet right now are going through a very similar thing, or something in some way that's related to this situation. So I think, I think it's beautiful and scary all at the same time.
I can share just a little bit of being on like a non-traditional path to sustainability. Maybe, a lot of people are going through something similar. So I actually majored in environmental engineering, thinking that it would be a very like direct, path to get into sustainability, and found out kind of, that wasn't where environmental engineers were going. We were more being funneled into like traditional engineering firms. And so I graduated with that degree about 5 years ago and have kind of since then been trying to maneuver into the sustainability path. And I just wanted to touch on, I think it was Melissa who mentioned, hers wasn't like a direct ladder. And what I had to do was kind of reevaluate after doing engineering for a couple of years and kind of see what probably 2 years ago, I was seeing more of like sustainability directors, CSR directors, really nothing entry level. And I was like, well, what do they have that I don't? Because I feel like my, degree would relate to being in sustainability. And what I saw was really a lot of people with communications backgrounds or some sort of marketing experience. So I ended up finding a nonprofit that's in the sustainability space, and I've been doing outreach for them on the marketing team for 2 years, which is totally not something I had like intended to do. But I just found that it was gonna build out my resume to reflect like what it seems like those people at that high level are doing. So, and now I'm actually starting an internship with Blue Diamond Almonds this month that is helping them build out their sustainability strategy. So just kind of like, it was what felt like a long roundabout path, but it is something that I think if you do kind of take that space, I took a year off between engineering and doing outreach to think about what I wanted to do next. I did some traveling, I did some like certifications, and I think that like it's paying off to just be really intentional with which steps I'm taking, even though I had to do, a job for a couple of years that wasn't what I wanted to be doing, for the long term. It definitely was worth it for getting me to where I am.
And how did you get connected with getting that internship?
So I have for probably 3 years, had all of the notifications on for sustainability, anything. Specifically, I was interested in the apparel space, but open to everything, because what I found is really, I value being a thought leader. That's what I think I bring to the table. And so creating sustainability strategies is really where I'm trying to go, whatever industry that's in. And so randomly was notified of this internship, which I wasn't looking for internships because I have, 4.5 years of work experience at this point. That wasn't my intention, but I came across it. And what I did is I reached out, I looked for Blue Diamond Almonds recruiter on LinkedIn, and I just messaged that person and said, I'm really interested in this position. I want to make sure that like my skills are a fit for it. I'd love to talk to you about it, give a little bit of, background info, and went through the process that way, instead of blindly applying, because like I think Sam said, these positions are really competitive right now. I feel like in my experience, I don't see a lot of entry-level, mid-level positions. I'm seeing them more, but they're not as plentiful as like a finance associate. So I think there is a lot of competition, and I definitely think that by reaching out to the recruiter, I was put at the top of the list.
I just note one thing that you did that people don't often do is they asked in the message to the recruiter what they could build in their resume to get there. It wasn't like, hey, I really want this thing. How do I get it? It's like, how do I build myself to be that person that you really want, or that the hiring manager wants? And that is just like the most chivalrous thing that you can do. It's really humble, and it just gives the person the opportunity to help you if they want to. It doesn't give them a oh, yes or no answer that they have to respond to. So thank you so much for that share, Hillary.
I have a question. I don't know, do you want us to use the chat box for the question, or just type it in and see what the group says? I guess my question is to all of you guys, how are you going to balance kind of opening the scope of your job search, not only in terms of roles, kind of what Sam was saying of what the industry needs, but also in terms of employers? I mean, Melissa named a great example, like, are we willing to work for Amazon? Are we willing to work for fill in the blank. And I'm just curious how others are balancing that right now.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick answer because that someone definitely jump in. I was talking to like Jessie. She's on Remake's team and she works for Primark. She came out of Parsons, been working with us for a while. I'm pretty sure she came out of Parsons. And that's harder to juggle. She's really passionate about sustainability. They're a huge organization, but I think sometimes you have to focus on, we all need to pay our bills and we all need to build our skill sets. I think that's a great question that I don't think there is any perfect answer to. I decided with my career path to go mission first, always. And I think that's why I spent a huge part of my job making $8 to $12 an hour early on. And it was interesting when I was at SoCo, I was talking to one of the women on the board, and she did the same thing. She ended up being, it's funny, we had very different paths. She ended up being the head of people and led people online. So took People Magazine online and led that whole digital transformation. And she started her career working at one of the big consulting firms and just like massive trajectory. She got into working with SoCo as being an angel investor. But what was funny is we both found ourselves at SoCo at the same time, and we both made different decisions on what to do first, but kind of ended up in the same place. Financially not the same place, but so like those are things to consider. But I think I don't think there's any right answer. And yeah, I like how Hillary put it too. It's just kind of like you have to do your gut check, kind of write down like what are those values, or like what do you prioritize, and strip that down to like a bare minimum too. It's like to the core foundation. And especially in a time like this, I think you have to use that as like the filter to make decisions on, and knowing that, especially we all know this now too, but you don't have to stay at jobs for too long or be committed to that company for too long either. That's a great question. Thanks, Camilla. Is anyone else? We got like a minute or so before we hit time. If anyone else wanted to share.
I can add a blurb to the answer for Camilla. I think like for when I'm doing a gut check, because there are a few jobs I saw that I was like, oh, it's everything I want except for the company. It's like, is the thing you dislike about the company something that you can change? Like right now, there's a sustainability manager role at Foster Farms, and I don't eat meat. And so for me, obviously that's not going to change, that it's Foster Farms. So then that wouldn't have been on my list. Or there was a vaping company that was looking for someone for a long time. And so I think it's like thinking about if the company itself and what it does is what you dislike, then probably maybe it's not the best fit. But if they just are doing something within it, but it isn't the core of what the company does, and that something is something that maybe you could change by being there, then that's for me, then I'll consider it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap us up by saying, one, just like thank you all for joining. This is our first kind of like experiment with this type of conversation. I think more than anything, we want to just start opening up the space and holding the space for more of this. I think as a community, we'll all be navigating how to, one, get a job in a crisis, and two, actually work in sustainability during this time as well. So Remake will be holding more of these virtual conversations around kind of like having a career in fashion and sustainable fashion and sustainability. So if you have any feedback for us, please send it. We'll definitely be open to that and taking it. And then Melissa and I will pull together the things that were shared in this call and a little more of the specifics that we have to share with y'all as follow-up. But thank you everyone for showing up. We really appreciate it. Hope it was helpful.
Should I stay after to talk to you about the role models?
Sure. Yeah, that works, Amelia. Thank you.
Bye all. Thank you.